All right, everyone, let's talk about how to build a good team in Raid Shadow Legends that works together properly. Now, this is going to be one of the most important aspects of the game. I would say even more important than learning individual champions is learning the synergy in the game that it's going to take in order to beat certain aspects of the game. Now, this is something that I feel is a very easy mistake to make as well, and I can safely say that I know that I've thrown together a bunch of what I thought were really good champions and then failed content. And that's because if you don't learn how to get champions to work together and what different things that you're going to need in order to beat certain aspects of the game, it doesn't matter how good your individual champions are, you're still going to fail. Now, with that being said, I have a list for you guys, and I wanted to start at the top, and this will hopefully help you kind of break it down and get a good sense of what it's going to take to build a good team in an easier way, because it's very easy to get overwhelmed with this stuff. Now, let's jump into number one. This is a very important one, and that is, what is the content that your team is going to be for? Before you even get into building your individual champions, it's really important to know what you're going to try to conquer, because every aspect of the game is going to be different. You have things like the clan boss, and then you have different dungeons like the Dragon's Lair, the Fire Knight's Lair. Even those two dungeons are very different. Then you have other dungeons like the Spider's Lair, which is going to be completely different as well. And each different aspect of the game is going to have its own challenges and its own roadblocks and things that you're going to want to consider when it comes to your team composition. And this leads into the next thing, and that is going to be, what are these things that you need to be aware of when it comes to building your team? Now, just as an example, if we go to the clan boss, there's a couple of things you need to be aware about. And your clan boss teams are going to be a lot different from, say your dungeon teams. So first of all, clan bosses have an insane amount of HP, but it's very unlikely that you alone are going to be doing all the damage to a clan boss to completely kill it. It's going to be you. You're going to do as much damage as you can to get the best chest reward that you can, and then the clan members that you have are going to hopefully also do damage, and you can work together to kill the boss and get double the rewards. But it's important to know that the clan boss has an insane amount of HP when you go into the battle, even if you don't end up killing it completely on your own. Because what that means is any kind of abilities or debuffs or skills that you have that scale off of enemy HP are going to be really, really useful. And that's going to be things like poisons. And poisons are known for being super useful in the clan boss because of this reason. And this is why you're going to have champions in your clan boss team that are going to be really, really good with super good poison debuffs that are probably not going to be very good in other aspects of the game where those poisons might not be as useful. Now, something else to keep in mind is that clan boss, as you battle it and as he takes more and more turns, he's going to ramp up in difficulty. So this is something else that you have to keep in mind when it comes to your survivability and when it comes to the support in your team. And again, these things are going to be different in every aspect of the game. Just in comparison, then you have the dungeon Fire Knight's Castle, completely different set roadblocks and challenges that you have to think about. The Fire Knight's Castle, he has a shield that he doesn't actually take a lot of damage until you end up hitting him a certain number of times. Once you end up hitting him and getting rid of his shield, that's when he's going to take the most damage. So, of course, you're going to want to build your team with champions that hit more than once in order to conquer this roadblock of him having that shield. And this is going to be different absolutely everywhere. I'm not going to go over every aspect of the game individually, but you guys get the idea of what I'm saying. Every different location and aspect of the game is going to have its own set of roadblocks, and Plarium does this on purpose because you can't use the same 5 champions in every single aspect of the game. You will be able to reuse certain champions that are versatile and have uses in multiple different areas across the game, but it's very unlikely you'll have the exact same team everywhere. And Plarium obviously does this to diversify the teams, to also get you to want to pull more, to get different champions that are going to be good in different areas. So very important before you actually get into breaking down the individual champions, and that's what we're going to dive into now, is individual champions. And I like to start off with this component first, and you guys will see as we get further into the list. And as we get into individual champions, I like to work on the buffers and the debuffers first. And there's 3 different categories that I like to think about. So first of all, when it comes to the buffers and debuffers, there is the what is basically needed category, and that is, if I didn't have these buffers or debuffers, I would not be able to beat this content. I go from being able to beat it to failing. And this is going to be especially important as you get into the later stages of the game, the more mid-game, the more late game. And this is another reason why I have this as the first thing on the list before even figuring out your DPS or any of that stuff. I like to have this because in the earlier stages of the game, it's more forgiving. If you don't have all the buffs and debuffs, you'll still be able to beat it. But as you get to the later stages of the game, you're really going to want to have the required buffs or debuffs, or it's going to either make the content insanely more difficult than it needs to be, or you're just going to straight up fail it and not even going to be able to beat it. So even if you're not at the end game, it's still a good habit to get into of trying to figure this stuff out first when it comes to your team composition. So you have the what is basically needed category. Then you have the what's recommended, and these are things that I really like to have. However, if I did take them out of my team, I would still find a way to be able to beat the content, but it would greatly affect it. Like maybe my efficiency or my time goes down. Like for Dragon's Lair, I have champions that I can take them out of my team, but if I replace them with another champion, it adds 3 or 4 minutes to my run, which it really sucks. So I don't like to do that. That's in the recommended but not needed category. Champions in the needed category, if I take them out, like if I take my Warlord right now out of my Dragon's Lair team, I can't beat it. Doesn't matter what other champions I have. I don't have the right composition. I need to have that champion there. And then you have the what is a waste to have. And this is the category where you really don't need them. And honestly, it could benefit you by taking them out because you don't need those buffs or debuffs or whatever it is. And you can replace that with something else that's going to add much more value to your team. And I'd like to tackle this for buffs and debuffs before we move into the next category, and that is going to be support. Now, I used Warlord as an example just now, but Warlord is going to be in the support category, and this is really, really important. Before we even jump into DPS, you guys might have noticed that I haven't mentioned DPS yet, and that is because we don't want to think about DPS yet until we know that we can stay alive. Our damage doesn't even matter if our champions are going to die. You're not going to do any DPS if you're dead and you fail the dungeon. So it's really important to make sure that we have the proper buffs and debuffs, especially for that difficult end game content. And it's very important to have the proper support to make sure that our champions can stay alive. And this is another major benefit to having defensive and HP scaling champions, is because they're going to have so much more survivability in comparison to attack scaling champions, which are going to be very squishy, that you're not going to need as much support in order to get them to stay alive. And because you're not going to need as much support in order to get them to stay alive, you'll be able to replace that support with, in turn, what's going to be more damaging units. So as you can see, it's a very difficult balance. It's not easy to achieve, but you definitely want to end up tackling this before you get to the DPS category. So very similarly as well to the buffs and debuffs, what is going to be needed? Like I said, the example I used was Warlord. Even though I said it for buffs and debuffs, it's really going to be for support here. If I don't have him in my team, I fail. It doesn't matter if I replace whatever champions I have. The other 4 champions, doesn't matter what I replace them right now with the way my team is. If I don't have him, I can't do the dungeon. Then you have what is recommended. And this, I would say, in my team would be champions like Sir Nicholas or something like that. You know, I really like to have him in my team. He's a good support. He does good damage, but I can swap him out for another champion, and I can still end up beating the content. But it does add a lot of difficulty, and I really don't want to do that if I don't have to. And then finally, you have the what is a waste to have. And this is especially important for support, because you don't want to have too much support, because your support units are probably not going to be doing as much damage as your DPS units. If you're overloaded on support, you could actually be beating the content that you're doing faster. So, you know, this is a balance. You're going to have to experiment, test around with this a little bit, but as long as your team can stay alive and beat the content, you know, then you don't have to completely overload the actual support that you have. And finally, we have the DPS category. Now, this is last on the list because, once again, it doesn't matter how much DPS you have. If your champions just die right off the bat, they're not going to do any damage, and you're probably going to fail the content anyway. So this is also last on the list because as you get to the later stages of the game, mid and late game, you're also going to be able to combine different categories. Like, you're going to have champions that are not just strong DPS, but they're also going to have good buffs or debuffs. Or you're going to have strong DPS, but maybe you have additional healing support as well. So the better champions that you get, the later in the end game, the more important it's going to be to optimize your different compositions, but also to kind of find champions that don't just do one of these things, but do several of them. And I would say this is especially important for DPS. Like, if you have champions that the only thing they bring to the table is DPS, it's going to be a lot more difficult to slot them into, you know, say, Dragon 20 teams. So this is going to be last up. Now, as we move from having all of the things that we need in order to complete the content, it's not done yet. There's still room to improve, and there's still room to optimize. And this is kind of leading from what I just said about finding champions that can kind of fit that category of being able to do more than one thing. And that is, are the roles filled? Is it viable? Can we actually beat the content? However, are there things that we can do? Are there champions we could swap out where we could still beat the content, but maybe make it more efficient? Is there a way we can improve the time? And this is really going to be more of a late game thing, because those of you guys who are still early to mid game, you probably haven't beaten the dungeon stages on max difficulty yet, but when you are late game, you have beaten pretty much all the content, and now you really spend a lot of your time on this step right here. What are things that I can do with the actual champions to replace them and swap them out that are still going to allow me to beat the content, but allow me to improve my actual efficiency? One thing that I didn't tackle is the aura, and I know I left this till last for an important reason, because I think that there are a lot of people who overvalue the aura, and I'm not saying that the aura is not important. It adds a tremendous amount of value to your team, especially having, for example, a very, very strong, you know, speed aura or something like that, right? So just as an example, if we go to auras here, you'll see that my High Katoon increases ally speed in all battles by 19%. This is across all your champions. Having an aura versus not having an aura is going to make a tremendous difference, but I think a lot of people overvalue it, because you have to keep in mind the benefit that you're going to get from an aura versus what you might sacrifice by bringing in a champion that might otherwise not be very useful for what you're trying to do. So, you know, High Katoon is a great example. I think that even this is something that I'm still trying to personally work on, and that is, you know, if there is a slightly worse aura that you might end up using, but you can bring in a significantly better champion that's overall going to really make your team much better, that's something that you probably want to prioritize. I would not necessarily start off with picking your aura champion as your first one, and I would do everything else and then figure out the aura last. Now, this is my personal preference. I know people who like to do it the other way, but I feel like some people just get stuck on feeling like they need a very specific champion with a very specific aura, and it can really set you back when it comes to optimizing your overall team. So this kind of last step is really my personal opinion when it comes to team composition, but you know, I thought that I would bring it up nonetheless. So with that all being said, I threw a lot of info at you guys in this video today, so I'm going to leave it here. With that all being said, I really hope that you guys enjoyed this very informational video about team compositions in Raid Shadow Legends. And if you guys did, consider subscribing to the channel. Really appreciate all the support, everyone. Over 23,000 subscribers. If you want to help out, toss a quick like. It means a whole bunch. And of course, if you're interested in more Raid Shadow Legends videos, guides, tutorials, and all that fun stuff, there is now getting close to 100 raid videos on the channel. They should be popping up right about now, and also to the right in your suggested videos. Have a great day, everyone. Take care, and until next time, this is Salt of the Salty Guild, signing out.